Just wait a couple minutes. All right, they're starting to come in. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Redder, Executive Director of the Joseph M. Labazo Alumni House on the RIT campus. And while the house is currently closed through July 1, 2021, we are taking reservations for beyond that. And I highly recommend that you check out our website that's going to be in the chat box. As you think about your future family gatherings, reunions, weddings, retirements, business meetings, and conferences, a visit is a wonderful way to reacclimate to RIT, and frankly, parking's a dream. Many in our RIT family have asked how they can help our students and the university in light of all that's happening in the world. We're incredibly grateful for those offers. There are two ways you can help out. First, our new graduates and current students are seeking positions for full-time careers and co-ops. If your company is hiring, please contact RIT's Career Services and allow them to post that position in our system. In addition, there's now an unprecedented need for financial aid scholarships for both our in-person and our virtual Tiger students. In honor of our special guest tonight, we'd like to highlight the Outdoor Education and Sustainability General Scholarship Funds as giving options for you. Those dollars assist with research projects and support students participating in those areas. Note that support of these areas will be counted in RIT's historic $1 billion campaign, which has just recently reached the $750 million mark. If you're able, please make a gift in the link at the chat box. Thank you. Now just a few housekeeping points. All attendees have joined in mute mode. However, your questions can be answered in the chat or question boxes at any time throughout the discussion. We'll make every effort to address all your comments and questions throughout the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you in the coming weeks. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to type those into the chat box as well, and we'll do our best to get to the appropriate answer. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Labazo Alumni House as part of the Club McKenzie series, celebrating wit, wisdom, inspiration, and intellectual stimulation with your favorite RIT faculty and staff. And in tonight's presentation in particular, we're celebrating maple syrup. I hope you all got your recipes and are sipping a lovely maple margarita at this point. I'd like to introduce the panelists now. Tom Connelly is the Director for Outdoor Education in the Division of Student Affairs at RIT, leading a department that offers a variety of outdoor, adventure, and environment-related wellness courses like whitewater kayaking, snowshoeing, stand-up paddle boarding, rock climbing. Outdoor Education has a rock climbing gym housed within RIT's own 100-year-old plus Wells barn at the west end of campus, and a small bicycle repair shop in the basement of Monroe Hall. He's been co-teaching their most popular course, Maple Syrup and Our Environment, with our campus sustainability team for 7 years. Tom earned a bachelor's degree in applied arts and sciences from RIT and his master's degree in service leadership and innovation just this past spring. Neha Harshita Sood is Assistant Director of Campus Sustainability at RIT. Neha is a 2015 graduate of RIT in environmental science and was a student in the inaugural Maple Syrup in Our Environment class. Something stuck. She began her professional career at Rochester in the New York chapter of the Nature Conservancy and returned to her alma mater in 2018 to join the sustainability team. In her spare time, she serves on the boards of Genesee Land Trust and the Rochester Ecology Partners, supporting local restaurants tending to her flower garden, and hiking with her dog. Tom and Neha, take it away. Our tiger audience is all yours.
Well, thank you, Kelly. We are certainly very excited to be presenting to you here tonight, and we think this is going to be a whole lot of fun. So Neha and I are going to give you an overview, basically, of the class that we've been co-teaching together called Maple Syrup in Our Environment. And we are going to cover a few different topics that we cover more extensively in the class. So we'll talk a little bit about history, mythology of maple sugaring. We'll talk about the evolution of the industry. Neha's going to talk a little bit about biology, physiology of trees. We're not going to get too much into the economics, but we'll mention some aspects of that. We're certainly going to talk about climate change, and we'll go through the whole process from identifying maple trees to the act of collecting the sap and converting that to maple syrup. We're hoping that this class is perhaps a little bit of a primer. So if this is something that you're interested, we'll be setting you off in the right direction to maybe take this up and tapping some trees and making some of your own maple syrup at home. So a lot of people don't realize that maple syrup is one of the few agricultural products that actually comes from North America and wasn't brought here from Europeans. The colonialists actually learned the process of maple sugaring from natives. And there's some origin stories that talk about that. So Glooskap was one of the tribal leaders who was away for some time. After returning, found that the members of his tribe had grown, well, a little bit lazy, and they were laying about drinking maple syrup right from the trees. So the idea at the time is that it wasn't maple sap, but actually fully concentrated sugary maple syrup that was flowing from the trees. The gardens had grown with weeds, the shelters were in disrepair, and they had grown overindulgent and enjoying the maple sap syrup flowing right from the trees. They got a little fat and lazy. So to address this, using his supernatural powers, crafted a very large bucket that he filled with fresh water from the nearby lake, rose up above the forest, and then dispensed the water into the tops of all the maple trees, which essentially diluted the maple syrup into what we know as maple sap, which is almost entirely water. He also talked to the creator and convinced the creator to limit the flow to just one time per year in the springtime. So that not only curbed the overindulgence, but also reintroduced a little bit of a work ethic, and that it required now some effort to collect that sap and turn it into maple syrup. Another story that perhaps is a little bit more descriptive of perhaps how they actually learned how to create maple syrup and maple sugar is that Mokwa one morning leaving the shelter discovered a bucket of water that was at the base of a tree that Woxus had, under which Woxus had left his axe stored in the tree when he left to go for the hunt. She used that water to prepare the meal for the day, which was boiling a meat, which was likely venison or moose. When Woxus returned, they enjoyed the meal, which turned out to be very sweet. And they came to realize that Woxus had not fetched the water for her as Mokwa had believed, but in fact, it was the sap that had flowed out of the maple tree from the scar from placing the axe there, discovering that it was the sweetness that concentrated as the water evaporated out as the meal cooked. Maple sugaring also has some noteworthy places in American history. Later on, both Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Rush, both signers of the Declaration of Independence, were strong advocates for maple sugaring as a way to avoid use of cane sugar, which was a product of slavery in the West Indies. So despite the fact even that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves, he was still a proponent of using maple sugar, and in fact went as far as cultivating a grove of maple trees at Monticello just so that he could have his own maple sugar produced there at home. So let's talk a little bit about identifying maple trees. Maple trees are among the few types of trees that have opposite branching in North America. Some of the others are the dogwood and the ash tree. Most of the trees that we see are the ash or the maple that have opposite as opposed to alternate branching. In the summertime, it's easy to identify the difference between the two by the leaves. In the wintertime, it gets a little bit trickier. So we'll give you some suggestions about how to tell them apart. Bark is a great indicator. The ash tree is known for, first off, being a very straight growing tree. They tend to grow very tall and very straight, but they have this characteristic diamond patterned bark. which is a good indication that it is an ash tree and not a maple tree. Another good clue is looking at the branches, the twigs at the ends of the branches. So in light of the fact that their leaves are very different, on the left, we see a sugar maple leaf. So maples grow singular leaves, where ash have compound leaf structures. So what that means is that the ash tree has to carry a heavier leaf structure. So the ash tree, you can see here in the image in the center, shows that the ash tree is a little bit stubbier branches at the end as opposed to the maple tree, which can be a little bit more dainty because they don't need to support as heavy of a leaf. So here's some different images of maple leaves. So in the summertime, they all look kind of similar. We have the sugar maple in the top left. It's called the sugar maple because it indeed has the highest concentration of sugar in the sap. So sugar maple can have 5% sugar, which is pretty good. That's pretty sweet. The black maple comes in second place, which can have, sometimes around 3%. A lot of the other varieties, the red maple, the silver, the Norway, we're usually around between 1 and 2% sugar in the sap. The Norway maple, by the way, is the only species of maple that is not from North America. That came from Europe. They're actually very commonly used in urban landscaping. They're very resilient trees and have been planted in a lot of urban environments. They look very similar, the sugar maple and the Norway maple leaves. Good way to tell those apart. The Norway maple, it's not easy to tell in the picture, but they tend to be a little bit broader leaf, and the sugar maple tends to be a little bit longer. Also, the points of the Norway maple, as well as the indentations, the sinuses, tend to be pointed, as opposed to the sugar maple, which tends to be a little bit more rounded. With that, I'm going to pause for a second. So what we'd like to do is give you the opportunity to ask any questions. I probably should have started with that. So we'll pause here for a second before Neha takes over. We'll go in segments. If you have questions, we encourage you to type those in as we go, so that way we can answer them maybe as we're talking about a particular topic, but certainly we're going to leave some time at the end to answer questions as well. So we'll pause, and Neha, while you're getting ready to do your next part here, certainly answer any questions that you might have.
So Tom, I have one from Jim. Do you tap all maple tree types or just the sugar maple?
It's a great question. You can tap any of them. The sugar maple is ideal because it genetically has a higher sugar content in the sap, which means there's less work for us to do. We'll talk a little bit later on about the ideal sugar content that we're looking to achieve in order to have maple syrup. So by starting with higher sugar content in the sap, that's less work for us to do, but any maple tree variety is sufficient, so long as they meet some other criteria, which we'll talk about. We're concerned about the size of the tree.
So you've been tapping maple trees on campus for how long?
We've been running the class for, this is, I believe, our 8th year running the class. And in that class, we do tap trees in a number of locations on the west side of campus. We, this past year, for the first time, tapped some of the maple trees right in the grounds at the Labazo Alumni House, which is fantastic. And we've moved around a few different places on campus, but yeah, it's been 8 years now, and it's really wonderful that we have that resource there to be able to do that.
Yeah, and just a little bit of good news to share with you and Neha is that we recently got approval and a donation of 4 additional sugar maple trees to place at the Labazo Alumni House as you're going up the driveway. So when fall comes around, it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful entrance. And in the spring, it'll actually have some activity, it appears.
That's fantastic.
Yay. All right, I think that was the questions. Those were the questions.
All right. So, thank you, Tom and Kelly. That's great news. That means more maple syrup. Yay. So as Kelly mentioned, I was an environmental science student and I studied biology, and I'm really fascinated by trees and just how organisms function. And maple sap production in particular is a really interesting and fascinating biological process. So I want to talk a little bit about just trees and what makes maple trees different biologically than some of the other trees. So just basic plant biology, here's a plant, and it has 3 tissue layers. The outermost, the dermal tissue, is essentially like the skin of the plant that keeps everything, water, molecules inside of the plant. The one place that water can escape from is the leaves. That's also the place where gas exchange happens. And it contains ground tissue, which is kind of the bulk of the plant. Ground tissue stores products. It's where photosynthesis happens, and it keeps the plant upright and functioning for the most part. And then inside of that is also the vascular tissue layer, and that is sort of like the blood vessels in human bodies. So the 2 vessels within the vascular tissue layers are xylem. There won't be a quiz later, so if you forget, it's okay. But the xylem and the phloem. And the xylem is the tissue. It's a tube that brings water and minerals from the soil through the roots up to the plant to the leaves. And phloem does the opposite. So phloem brings prepared food from the leaves of the plant to the rest of the plant, including to the root. So these 2 systems, these 2 pipes, essentially work hand in hand. But the xylem is the one that's really responsible for the water, and that's the critical one, more critical one for maple sap extraction. So if you look on the right, this image contains the different layers of a tree trunk. The outermost layer, again, that's the dermal layer. And that bark layer is where the phloem and the food vessel exists. So if you did strip a tree all around the outside, if you strip the bark off, that actually doesn't allow the tree, that inhibits the tree from sending food down to its roots, and eventually will kill the tree. The layer that we tap into when we are extracting sap is the sapwood layer, which is part of the xylem layer. And inside of that is the heartwood. If you tap the heartwood, then you've gone too far. So it's really the sapwood xylem layer. And the interesting part, or the unusual part, is that, xylem, like I said, basic plant biology tells us that xylem contains water and minerals or salts from the earth, from the ground up. And so theoretically, it should taste like salt water, but instead it tastes sweet. And that's a really the unique feature of maple and certain other trees that produce syrup. And the hypothesis is that the theory, I should say, is that some of the starch and the food that the tree produces breaks down and seeps into the xylem layer and allows us to extract it from the tree. And the way this process works is it's important to kind of think about what the tree does throughout the year. And it's broken down cyclically. So first we would look at summertime. And of course, in summer, the leaves are green, it's beautiful, there's lots of sunshine, there's warmth, ideal conditions for the plant to produce food. So plants use the photosynthesis process to make food for themselves and also for everyone else. So we, of course, rely on plants as the basis of our food chain and every food chain on the planet. It also is important because it produces the oxygen that we breathe. And trees are, of course, important to capture extra carbon dioxide. Now, that's critical because trees sequester carbon, and that one of the concerns that we have as climate scientists and environmental scientists is greenhouse gas emissions, and how do we capture some of that carbon dioxide? Well, trees are the best at that. And at RIT, we're lucky that we have a lot of trees because it helps us with our climate commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030. And maple trees in particular are really good because a 40 to 50-year-old maple tree has absorbed over 1 ton of carbon dioxide during its lifetime. That's just one tree. So it does add up when we count tens, hundreds of thousands of trees on our campus. Now in the fall, when the temperatures are starting to drop, the days are cooler, there's less sunlight. The plant is starting to slow down its chlorophyll production, and that's when you get, the leaves transition from green chlorophyll to orange colors. And you see the beautiful fall colors, red, just the iconic red maples that you see in New Hampshire, Maine. And what's happening during that time is that the sugar that the plant was producing is being converted for long-term storage. And that's when some of this, the sugar content is, the hypothesis is that it's starting to enter the xylem layer, but it's not quite there yet. It's in the winter time when we actually are ready to tap into the trees. That's when most of that happens. Now, the critical part about winter is that, like Tom mentioned, you can't see the leaves because there aren't any. And remember 2 slides ago, I had mentioned that leaves are the only place that gas exchange and water loss can happen inside of a tree. So in the wintertime, the roots are still sucking up some water, but it has nowhere to go. And when you have temperatures drop significantly, like under 32 degrees freezing temperatures, the sap, because if it's relatively low in sugar content and minerals, it freezes pretty easily, which creates a pressure change. During the day, when the temperatures rise again to above freezing, the sap will thaw. And that change in pressure, the change in the ice, the freezing sap versus the liquid sap, is what allows the sap to run. And that's, it's a combination of different forces where water likes to kind of stick together, that allows it to kind of stay in the xylem column. And because of that freezing and thawing is also the general theory is that that's why starch, as it's being broken down into sugar molecules, the molecules are small enough at that stage that they can move more easily through the plant cells. And so what makes maple trees sweet? So a few different factors. The weather. So when you have a good weather season, that means that you have, temperatures that are freezing at night, but not freezing during the daytime for a long period of time. That's really good for maple syrup production. Good quality soils, so nutrient-rich soils with a lot of, water content is good for maple trees. Plants that don't have to compete too much with each other tend to have more and better quality sap inside of them. Now, maple trees are great because they're okay as understory plants. They don't feel the need to compete too much with other trees in their neighborhood. And so that kind of allows them to be another great species for maple sap extraction and production. Aspects of things like, the direction of slope where the trees grow in our area, south gets the most sunlight, things like that also have an impact. And of course, Tom mentioned that sugar maples are the ones that are the most sweet. So genetics plays a big role as well in the sweetness of maple sap. So I will pause there and ask if there are any questions before I turn it back over to Tom to talk more about how we tap trees at RIT.
We actually have a couple of questions here, and one of them is just how or what is the best soil for maple trees to grow in? A little more acidic, less acidic, and what if you have clay that it's growing in? Is there anything that you can do to treat the soil to actually even change the taste of the syrup that you ultimately end up with? So there's a bunch of soil questions there.
A lot of soil questions. I should have paid more attention in my soil science class. So a few things. If you have, generally this area of the soil is good for maple production. If you have too much sand or too much clay, that's not good for maple trees, but they can function and they do well in a wide variety of different soil ranges, especially as the tree gets older, it's better able to adapt to the conditions that change from year to year. But soil that has a higher organic content is also good for maple trees, from what I understand. Which when you have a tree, it kind of does that naturally in the wild. When the leaves fall, the soil kind of captures some of that carbon and sequesters it over a large period of time. And so the soils that are RET can get pretty high in organic content. But I would have to look up, I'm happy to look up and provide some more information on if you were to, grow maple trees at home.
I think we have somebody who's interested in planting maple trees because they're wondering, when you first plant them, would you recommend fertilizer just to help it get acclimated?
It depends on how old your tree is when you're planting.
Oh,
So if you're planting a baby sapling, I haven't had very good luck with that, truthfully. But if you're planting a tree that's a few years old, you can, I think it's easier for that to adapt. There is, if you live in Monroe County, they're doing a tree sale. The Monroe County Soil and Water Conservation District is doing a sale for really, good prices, and it's going to a good cause. I'm happy to look up the link and throw it in the chat while we talk.
that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think we're good there. I don't see any other additional questions. So, Tom, I think you're up.
Okay, so we've talked about identifying maple trees. We've got a little lesson on the physiology of trees to better understand the sap flow. And we're going to talk a little bit more about selecting a tree for tapping. So Neha gave us some information about what sort of things benefit a tree in terms of sugar production. Some of the things that we want to consider. First off, we want to make sure that we're tapping a mature maple tree. So in a moment here, in a future slide, I'll talk about tree trunk diameters that we're looking for, but we want to make sure that we are looking for mature, well-grown maple trees. We would prefer a tree with a nice full canopy, which is an indication that it had maximum opportunity to produce lots of sugar without as much competition with other trees. We want to make sure that we've got good access to the place that we're going to tap. I'll share with you a couple of mistakes that I've made in the past. I remember at one point I had a student who tapped a particular tree. I was completely oblivious to the fact that the ground was frozen at the time, but as it thawed, we discovered there was a lot of standing water right there, and the student ended up having to wade through knee-high water to get back to the place where they had tapped the tree. So being conscious of how things are going to change as the seasons change is very important. Similarly, we had another tree where we tapped that was close enough to the road that after the plow came by a few times, the mound was so high that it virtually buried the place where we had tapped on the tree. So thinking about what's coming ahead is really important. In terms of the location on the tree that you tap, you just want to make sure that it's a comfortable location. You want to avoid previous taps. I'll talk coming up a little bit about movement away from holes from previous years. There was some old conventional wisdom that suggested that under a big branch or over a large root is optimal for collecting the most sap, and research more recently has shown that that's really irrelevant. If you tap anywhere really on the trunk, you're going to get likely an equal amount of sap. Of course, depending upon where that is in terms of the temperature changes, it might flow a little bit later or a little bit earlier, but in the end, you're going to collect about the same amount. So what we're looking for the diameter of the tree, we don't want to tap a tree that's any less than 12 inches in diameter typically. The reason is that we want to make sure that the tree is big enough and resilient enough that we're not introducing any harm to it. So anything smaller than 12 inches, there's a risk that it's going to be unhealthy for us to tap the tree and collect sap from it. Anything bigger than 12 inches, it's really a minimally impactful endeavor, and that we're not compromising the health of the tree. We can get up to 12 to 20 inches with one tap. 21 to 27, we can spread out taps and have 2 taps. More than 27 inches, we can do 3 taps. Rule of thumb, kind of an easy way to measure, at least get an idea, is if you can put your arms around the tree. If the tree is too big for you to touch your fingers, then it might be big enough for 3 taps. For the trees that we use in the class, we only do 1 tap per tree. We're not really looking to maximize sap collection. We do it more for the educational experience, and we collect more than enough sap so that at the end of the class, every student gets at least a pint of maple syrup to take home with them. So looking at now how we go about getting the sap out of the tree, on the left here, we see the primitive method of cutting a large V into the sapwood. Certainly effective in terms of getting the sap out, but also very harmful to the tree. That's not something that we do anymore. That's really not a process that we should consider for our own hobby purposes. That could actually be fatal for the tree. In the center, we see a bucket that's actually made specifically for this application. There's a small hole drilled into the tree with a spile that's inserted, and that's very common method at the hobby level. On the far right, we see tubes that are connected. So that is a method used by Maple Farm. So a larger agricultural process would involve networking hundreds or even thousands of maple trees together that could possibly all come together at a pump house where maybe there's even some negative pressure used to encourage sap flow. So when we find the tree and we get ready to tap, some things that we want to consider, as I mentioned, we want to avoid holes from the previous year. So we want to move 4 to 6 inches to one side or the other. So we want to move horizontally. It's also good to move up and down. Some research says that up to 12 inches moving up and down as we make our way around the tree is helpful. Keeping in mind that if we're only doing one tap on the tree and it's a sizable tree, by the time we make our way all the way around the tree and we get back to that first tap, we're probably not even going to see it anymore because new growth will have buried it at that point. So it'll end up actually being a spiral pattern, if you can imagine what a cross section of the trunk would look like. So when we drill the hole, we're going to go in, as Neha mentioned earlier, into the sapwood. So we're going about 2 to 2.5 inches in. In the picture, they're using a hand drill, which is great. A power drill is good too. We do want to make sure that we angle the bit up slightly because we are actually getting the sap that's coming down from the branches above, and that'll encourage sap flow. If you go too steep, then it'll be more likely that maybe a high wind or something else could knock the tap out. But a slight angle is very helpful. And it's important too that you drill nice and straight. If you wobble too much, then the hole gets a little too big and your spile may not be seated all that well. As you drill, you want to make sure that you're looking at the debris that comes out. It should be healthy, light colored wood. If it's dark, you may be in a spot that's rotted or an unhealthy section of the tree, and you should consider a different, possibly a different tree, but certainly a different location. The bit size is going to be dependent upon the particular spile that you're using, and I'll show you some examples here. So the ones on the left two are very common spiles that are used. Those typically require 7/16 bit. The idea is that you drill your hole, you take out all of the debris, and then you lightly tap it in. You want to make sure it's well seated. You don't drive it in like a nail. You just want to make sure that it's nice and secure. And then you can put your collecting vessel underneath it. You can hang it right off of the spile. The hook is actually made to go into the hole of some buckets that are made specifically for this purpose that have a hole in them that will hook on there. The other hole in the spile is actually for a rod that can hold a lid over the bucket. The lids are helpful because they help keep debris out, and they also help shed further precipitation. Ultimately, what we're going to try to do is take water out, and adding more water is just going to mean more work for us in the long run. So the spiles on the far right are the ones that accept tubes on the end, and that would be the type of spile that is more commonly used in a larger agricultural, in a maple farm. One thing that is important is we want to make sure that we sanitize all of our spiles because they're going to be in the tree for a long period. Introduction of any type of bacteria is going to speed up the process by which the tree heals itself. And if we tap either too early or if we tap with equipment that's not clean, it's possible that the hole is going to close up before the sap run is actually done. here are some do-it-yourself options. So all of these tools and equipment are available. You can go on Amazon, you can buy them. You can go to your local like Country Max or other types of hardware stores commonly have equipment for tapping at home, but you certainly don't need to spend money on those things. You can take some containers out of your recycling bin, clean those out good. And on the right, there's actually a natural spile. That's actually a sumac branch. So sumac has a very soft pith that can be kind of poked out with like a coat hanger or whatever, to hollow it out. You scrape the bark off, and then you can, I haven't done this myself, but I've read a bit about it, and apparently works pretty well. So we've got some options that involve some natural tools and some recycling. So no need to go out and spend a bunch of money on new stuff. So that's the gist of collecting the sap. We do want to make sure that I'll get into a little bit more with the next section here. We want to process that pretty quickly. Sap doesn't have a long life. It can spoil pretty quickly, especially if it's exposed to higher temperatures for an extended period or open air. That's both going to encourage spoiling. So we want to try to process the sap within 24 hours if we can. But putting the sap in an airtight container, keeping it out of the sun, and keeping it at a low temperature, so packing snow around your collecting container certainly helps make it last a little bit longer because boiling every day is not always that feasible. So how about I pause here for a second, see if you have any other questions.
So Tom, curiosity, temperature wise, when do you know it's right? How do you know that sap is gonna flow? How do you know if you're doing it too early or too late?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And the thing that we're looking for is it's not going to happen the second the temperature gets above freezing. We want to make sure that it is below freezing at night. That's really important. But then it's going to need to get into the high 30s, maybe the low 40s Fahrenheit in order to really disrupt, to create that big pressure differential that's going to allow the sap to, the ice crystals to thaw and the sap to flow down from the branches. So what you can do is once you start to see that forecast, I mean, it doesn't have to actually be flowing, but you can tap at that point. If you see in the forecast in the coming week, we're going to get up into the 40s. That's the time to go ahead and put your taps in, and then, you see what happens. It can slow down if you have an extended period where we have, multiple days that are below freezing. But we're typically looking at, anywhere from, 3 to 4 weeks to upwards of 6-7 weeks, up to 8 weeks actually for an extended sap flow. And it'll change a little bit too, depending upon where you are. So higher elevations, it's gonna happen a little bit later. Areas where there's more shade, it's going to take a little bit longer for the increase in temperature to have effect on the trees. And also, if you look at what maple farms are doing, their season's a little bit longer, especially if they're using pressure, if they're applying pressure. So if they're actually applying negative pressure to draw sap out, that means they can start a little bit sooner and end a little bit later. As far as when our season ends, so I know your question was about when it starts, but then also when it ends. If you're doing things at the hobby level where you're not applying any negative pressure to draw the sap out, it'll naturally just stop flowing. But some things to look for, if your sap ever starts to appear milky, when it comes out of the tree, it's going to look like water, and it should always look like that. If it starts to have any type of milkiness to it, it's time to stop. What happens is the tree starts to get ready to bud, the chemistry of the sap changes, and it's no longer suitable to try to transform into maple syrup.
So it's not sweet any longer then?
It starts to, I haven't had a lot of experience with this myself, but they describe it as a buddiness that you can start to taste it if it gets too close.
A little woody, if you will, yes.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. Likewise, if the smell changes, if you start to smell any type of odor, then it's probably also time to stop processing what you're collecting.
So given the choice between sumac, a metal spike, and spile, or a plastic spile, is there a benefit to one or the other?
At the hobby level, I don't know. I actually haven't used the sumac branch myself. I'm going to have to try it. Maybe we'll actually do that in the class this year.
I'm just sort of thinking, good,
Yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of the plastic units are not necessarily meant to be reused, so that's certainly a factor. The metal can easily be, you know, is more resilient, it'll last longer, it's easy to sanitize, so you can use those year after year. So that's one thing to consider. When you're doing things that actually involve pressure, there's a lot of science more recently that talks about the benefits of the pressure in different size tubing. So that's not something we're worrying about when we're tapping trees in our backyard, but that does become a factor for people that are really concerned about, you know, every dollar spent and, you know, the amount of productivity they get from the tools that they're using. But I would say, well, you know, whatever it is that you can find that serves your purposes. I think that looking at it to consider, does it have a hook? Am I going to want to put a lid on this? Am I going to hang my container, my collection container? Is it going to sit on the ground? So maybe you want to use a spile that has a tube because you're going to run the tube to a container that's going to sit on the ground instead of being up high, you know. We've had some, particularly with the increase in acute weather incidents in the last few years, really windy days have knocked the buckets off the trees and pulled the spiles out. So that's something to consider. You know, when they start to fill, they're heavier, maybe they're a little better seated, but if that's a concern, it gets a little tricky to try to, you know, wrap bungee cord around the tree. So maybe a container on the ground is better, you know, kind of, you know, live and learn.
I love this question too. How do you know when a sugar maple tree is just tapped out? And I don't think they mean during the season. I think you've sort of explained that. But does a sugar maple get too old to produce? I mean, we understand disease. We understand that there might be some rotting going on, but
yeah,
lifespan of a sugar maple.
Yeah, I don't know of anything that is necessarily associated with the age of the tree, other than just general tree health, right? Neha, I'm gonna look to you to see if you have anything else to clarify or add in on this, because I think this is maybe something that you might be a little better suited.
And that was the last question that I collected there. So.
I think you're right, Tom. As long as the tree is healthy and alive and well, it will produce sap. Yeah.
All right, great. So let's talk about, we've collected our sap and we're gonna now make maple syrup. So as I said before, we wanna make sure we process that pretty quickly. And there's a number of different ways to go about doing this. What we're doing is we're taking something that's a relatively low sugar content and we're making a much higher concentration of sugar. And there's different ways we can do that. We can use some energy from nature, because when it gets really cold at night, if the liquid starts to freeze, it's only the water that's going to freeze. So in the morning, we can scoop out all of the ice, and that's going to be a natural way to increase the sugar concentration by removing some of the water that is frozen. The other way is to add heat. So on the left is a depiction of a recreation of the the process of heating up rocks to add those to the sap. The idea would be that they're in a container that, probably wooden or bark, they can't go over an open fire. So that was how it was done via a more primitive method. And the center is more of a common way of doing this at the hobby level. You have a big pot that goes over a wood fire. You can certainly do this side, you can do it in your kitchen, but I have to forewarn you, you need to make sure you have really good ventilation. I've heard really terrible stories about people that have boiled for long periods over the stove without good ventilation, and that moisture can collect in the ceiling, which can lead to really horrible outcomes. So please be careful if you do it inside. Outside's always better. The wood fire, it's really nice. That works really well. On the far right, we see a commercial evaporator. So this is a picture of an evaporator that's made for handling the sap that comes from hundreds, if not thousands of trees. This is a picture of the evaporator that we bought for our class a few years ago. So this was an investment. The class was going so well, we decided it'd be worth spending some money on something to make our lives a little bit easier. So this is an evaporator that will handle up to about 20 taps. Typically, we're doing between about 10 and 15 for the class. It's propane operated. It's got 3 65,000 BTU burners, and it will boil off up to about 8 gallons of water an hour. So it's quite powerful, and it works really, really well for our purposes. And we're processing about, boy, it's different every year, but we're probably collecting about 100 to 150 gallons of sap and ending up with about 3 gallons of syrup at the end of the class. So now let's talk a little bit, how do we know when we have maple syrup? So we know when you have to remove water, we're increasing the sugar content. There's different ways to do that. We can do that by way of measuring temperature. We can look at how the light refracts when it goes through the liquid, and then we can measure the density as it compares to water. The latter two are a little bit more higher level, not necessarily something you need to get into at the hobby level. If you have a good candy thermometer, that's really all you need to make maple syrup at home. That'll work just fine. So what we're looking in terms of temperature is we want to get to 7 degrees Fahrenheit above boiling. So if we're at sea level, water's going to boil at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. We're looking for 219 degrees then. And we're getting as close as we can to 66.9% sugar. Now we're not going to get exactly there using this, coarse temperature measurement method, but we're going to get pretty close. So we want to get to at least 66% sugar, and we know that if we get to 219 degrees Fahrenheit, then we're just about there. The reason why that sugar concentration is important is because if we were to go higher, so if we were to take out more water and have a higher concentration of sugar, then the syrup's actually going to start to crystallize. The sugar is going to precipitate out. If we don't take out enough water, so if we have less sugar content, then it's not going to be shelf stable. Then there's going to be more likelihood that we're going to get mold, for example. Which isn't the end of the world if that happens. We can fix that. A lot of people, I have yet to experience it myself, but it's common that if mold does form, you can scrape it off and reboil it, and you're good to go again. It's good to keep your syrup refrigerated after you open a container, and that'll help discourage mold growth. So if we were to keep heating, then we can create other types of maple products. So once we get past maple syrup, if we increase the temperature, we get to maple cream, and then sugar on snow, soft sugar candy, and then ultimately when we get to 100% sugar, that's pure granulated maple sugar. So this part may speak to a little bit to a question earlier too about what contributes to the flavor of maple syrup. Certainly there's a terroir, so all the different environmental factors that play into the development of the sap. But there's also the product of bacterial activity, right? So you may recall, so if you're fans of maple syrup and you've gone to the store, you may have seen different actually types. So this isn't talking about log cabin or, those types of things that actually have no maple product in them. This is real maple syrup. At some time in the past, there was different grades. It was A, B, C, and that grading system has since been done away with and replaced with a more updated version because the concern was that it was actually misleading people to think that there was somehow less quality with the darker syrup. That's not really the case. It really just comes down to preference. So the different types of syrup, whether it's really light and more of a delicate flavor and really dark with a stronger flavor, it's really, it's the exact same amount of sugar. It just really comes down to preference. And what produces those different levels of darkness and strength of flavor is dependent upon the amount of bacterial activity that occurs once the sap comes out of the tree. So generally speaking, this isn't true 100% of the time, but generally speaking, the sap that's collected earlier in the season produces lighter syrup, and the sap that's collected towards the end of the season produces darker syrup. And the reason is that as we get later in the season, it gets warmer, which means that once the sap comes out of the tree, it has more exposure to heat. And also if you increase the amount of time before processing, that allows the bacteria then to break down what is sucrose, which is the main sugar that's in the sap, breaks it down into fructose and glucose, which will caramelize at a lower temperature. So it's the product of that bacterial activity that will lead to more caramelization. So you end up with a darker syrup, which is how we end up with something that is a little bit stronger. Some people don't really like the flavor of the really strong syrup, and a lot of that might get used just for ingredients, as a, for baking, for example. But some people have a preference for that. So we'll pause there again for any questions.
Yeah, there's one question about sort of helping Mother Nature along. So you were talking about how you didn't mind if it froze at night because the sap wouldn't freeze, just the water portion would. So this is my question. I'm sort of wondering if you collect the sap and you've got them in tubs or whatever, and you've got a big freezer, does it help to actually freeze it too before you boil it if you've got the space?
Yeah, you certainly can. So yeah, I mean that will work. I haven't really gone through and calculated the amount of energy that goes into that. So when you think about the number of kilowatts that you use to power your freezer, right. So what the path of least resistance is there. The idea is that if it's going to be freezing at night, we're not expending any, we're not introducing any other type of fuel, so to speak, to accomplish that. So that's where it's really helpful to, take advantage of the, Mother Nature there. But you certainly can. Freezing is certainly an option, and that would be an effective way of, reducing the water content.
I was just curious about that. I've got a couple other questions, but I think that they'll be addressed in the next section.
Yeah, great. I just want one more comment that's in the spirit of what you're asking there, is that one of the reasons why maple syrup is so expensive is because the sugar content is so low when it comes out of the tree, and the amount of work and the amount of resources needed to go from sap to syrup. So if we're at 2% sugar, for example, coming out of the tree, it's going to take 43 gallons of sap to get 1 gallon of syrup. And thinking about all of the energy that's required and the labor and the logistics of doing that's why real maple syrup is so expensive, because it's a very resource intensive process.
And the more Mother Nature can do to help that process out, the better.
Exactly. Better for Mother Nature too. All right, so Neha?
So speaking of Mother Nature, I think, our area, we're seeing a lot of changes happening ecologically that is affecting maple syrup production, maple trees, maple forests. I'm trying to advance the slide. Oh, here we go. Okay. So one of the, as far as maple forests go, the long-term effects of climate change, we're starting to see it a little bit for some of our forest cover in this area. But in the next 50 to 100 years, the projections or the current trends in climate change tell us that our maple trees, which is on the left is the bright red is the maple beech birch forest. Those are moving farther and farther up north into Canada. So as temperatures are increasing in this area, these trees are starting to move even farther up north, which is great news for Canada, not so much for us, not so much for Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine and even New York, because that would mean that our maple syrup production industry will take a little bit of a hit. Another thing that's happening with trees moving north is that more and more invasive species of bugs are moving into our geography. So Asian longhorn beetle is one that does certain maple trees, and we're lucky that it's not here yet. But in the case of the emerald ash borer, you might, if you have ash trees in your property, or if you come to RT's campus and look for ash trees, you'll see these tiny holes where the ash borer has been kind of digging in. And so most of our ash trees, unfortunately, will be bored to death, pardon the pun, in the coming decade or so. And so we are thinking about, long-term from a climate strategy perspective as an institution, well, what should our tree cover look like to sustain the health of our forests in the long term? So as trees change and as forests change, that also changes the syrup industry. And so too far. So some of the climate change impacts that are more short-term and more acute impacts are things like extreme weather events. So in 1998, this was before I came to the Rochester area, there was a devastating ice storm that really took a toll on the maple industry throughout the Northeast. And that was a very poor season for maple syrup production for Vermont, for New Hampshire. And so that is, as climate change is, we're starting to feel the impacts of it with, you've probably seen the news in Texas and places all around the United States is seeing things that we haven't seen before in our lifetimes. That's only increasing. Other things that, the extreme weather events can hurt young saplings. It can kill saplings that aren't really mature yet, which has a long-term impact in the forest. And of course, the maple syrup or the sap production in the tree, even in healthy mature trees, can be disrupted because of ice storms. The other impact is of shorter winters. So traditionally the maple syrup season can be 6-8 weeks longer, but when we have 50 to 55 degree temperatures in February or March, it's great news for us humans living in cold and dreary Rochester. But for trees, it's actually an indication that spring is here. So if maple trees start to put their buds out too early, at that 55 degrees temperature range over a period of 3 to 5 days, that turns the sap bitter. That's what gives the buddy flavor that Tom was talking about. So if that happens too soon, that's tricky. Also, if we have really extreme weather, so right now we haven't, there's a question, are we tapping now? And we haven't tapped trees yet. And even local farms that have tapped trees, they haven't actually collected sap yet, because the temperature has remained under freezing during the day as well as at night. So last year, this time, our local farms here were already collecting sap because the temperature had risen above 32, about 40 degrees in during the daytime, but not so much quite yet. So we're hoping that within the next 2 weeks or so, we'll see that sap is starting to run. And then the other thing with winter time is that if we have too much snow or too little snow, that can also have a big impact. In our area, even though we're seeing warmer temperatures, we're expecting to see more precipitation and more snow because the lake that's north of us, Lake Ontario, doesn't freeze over. And so more water evaporates from the lake and then it comes down as snow or rain. But if we get too little snow any given year, that can allow for more grazing of younger saplings, which is also kind of unfortunate. So it really is a tricky thing. And I did post a link in the chat about, if you were to start your own maple trees, they do really well as individuals. Adult trees, they're pretty resilient. They can, thrive in lots of sunshine, partial sunshine. They have, like I mentioned, they can thrive in pretty much any soil condition that's not too extreme. But as a forest, the impacts of climate change collectively can be pretty devastating for the syrup industry. So if you do enjoy maple syrup, you should think about climate change and how that might be impacting the things that you love, from maple syrup to coffee beans to just general food production. And what can we do, right? So I recently learned about maple syrup industries and the harms that are, or the effects of climate change on this particular industry. And so some of the ways to help is to support your local maple farms and support local farmers in general, because they're going to have to think about a different business model for the long term, like the next generation or a few decades from today. But we can support them now. Plant trees, plant maple trees, plant other trees, and care for them. If you have space in your backyard, it's a really good thing to do. And who knows, maybe you'll develop a nice fun hobby as well. And then finally, like I mentioned, learn about climate change, think about what organizations that you support are doing to address climate change and how you can get involved in that particular, movement, or how you can help. And we'd be happy to share resources at RIT Sustainability and Outdoor Education with you if you would like. And with that, I will once again pause, and I think this is our final pause, so open it up for general questions. Kelly, I'll turn it back over to you. Kelly, you're on mute.
We've got a question here. How often do you have to check the volume from your tap without worry that it will overflow? Or is that okay? Or we only get a little each time, and you must collect it more regularly within that 24-hour period?
Yeah, it's a good question. It can actually be startling how much sap will flow out of the tree. We have in the past have set up a schedule for a tree that's tapped that they get checked twice a day. And we've actually had full buckets midway through the day. So
Wow.
yeah, it can really flow. You really do have to keep an eye on it. On a day where you've got really big temperature differential, if that tree has a lot of exposure, a lot of sun exposure, and the temperature really climbs after a really cold night, then yeah, you can get quite a bit of sap out in a short period of time.
So Neha, I was really interested in your map of the trees and what the types of trees that are going to be around. I guess I need a little more clarification on the maple trees in Vermont and New York. Are they disappearing, or will they disappear, or is that just to scare me?
No, I didn't mean to scare you. So I think the trees that are healthy, as long as they stay healthy, they'll be here. The tricky part or the concern is more with young saplings. So as trees produce more saplings, they may not have the right conditions to survive.
You had me worried that I was going to be buying my future maple syrup from Minnesota, and that just didn't sound right.
I think Canada is more likely, honestly.
Canada,
Mhm.
yeah.
But hopefully not for a very long time. And hopefully we can reverse some of these effects.
Well, are there any other questions from our attendees? I just want to share one little fun thing with everyone, and that is that Tom and Neha and I have gotten to know each other, along with Enid Cardinal, who's our director of sustainability at campus. And since we've opened up the Labazo Alumni House, it's sort of become maple syrup central, or it was last spring, and I'm really looking forward to it happening again. As I mentioned, we have a few trees around the Labazo Alumni House. We'll be adding sugar maples up the driveway. But one of the neat things that they've done is once they start to collect the sap and they start processing it, they use the Lachaise patio, and that's where they keep the evaporator. And so I will come into the building early in the morning and I will leave late at night, and there is somebody always manning that evaporator. And I can't wait till, the operation gets to be such that we can share the maple syrup with folks all over the place. It'd be kind of nice to have alumni maple syrup available.
That would be a dream come true. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it'd be so much fun. Well, thank you, Neha and Tom, for sharing your passion and your knowledge with us all. Our audience members will receive an email from us within a week or two with a link to today's webinar recording, and they're welcome to share it. Thank you too to our interpreters, Jennifer and Nicole, and our live captioner. Thank you for being here tonight. And a reminder that these Tiger webinars are available on the RIT Alumni Association YouTube site. The link is in the chat box, so feel free to catch up on past events that we've had. And you can view a full listing of upcoming virtual events at www.rit.edu/alumni/events. We have several each week, and we'd like to include you in as many of these as possible. Please exit this webinar by simply closing your browser window, and please do let us know what you thought of the webinar through a brief survey you'll receive via email. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay positive, stay your course. Oh, we got one more question. Oh, it was, this has been fabulous. Thank you. And that's from Kathleen Anderson. She's a former Alumni Association president.
Okay.
And she appears to have enjoyed it immensely.
All right.
Okay. Nice job, guys. That was really awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having this idea and for coordinating it. It was really a whole lot of fun. And
I have lots. I'm trying to figure out how I can get you to teach stand-up paddle boarding via webinar. So, I can't stand up on the paddleboard. I have tried. I just tip over. It's just, that's who I am. I'm starting to just sort of embrace that, who I am. And Kimberly too also says, thank you for a great presentation. So how wonderful.
Thank you for being here, everyone.
Yes.
Um,
So what'll happen next is that I will wait for this to, I get a notification when this is all done. Thanks, Maureen. Glad you could join us. And then I'll edit down the before and after, so we won't see a lot of this part, but it'll be a rock solid presentation. You guys did wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
you.
It was great. And by all means, if anybody reaches out, I'm more than welcome to field any questions after the fact, really any of this, and questions about outdoor ed, anything that I can help with. So definitely don't hesitate to pass along, inquiries.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Kelly, if we ever do you start to meet in person again, I'm happy to do maybe Tom, you and I can partner on this again, a paddle boarding trip to for Alumni.
Maybe I'll convince John Rodwa that we need a rock climbing team building program, just little team building. And if it isn't rock climbing, something at the barn. I did that once a long, long time ago with the team, and they loved it.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. They loved it. They didn't love the not bathroom, restroom area in the barn. That was a little tough. That was before we had the house and all of that, but that shouldn't be an issue now. But I'll make the recommendation to John and just say we really need to do something fun. Hey, you know what? We should have a maple syrup tasting contest like we did with the Board of Trustees. That was so much fun. They all picked the fake maple syrup as their favorites. That was hilarious.
Summertime is really a great time for us because there's, with the lower, on-campus student population, especially this year, there's just, we don't run as many of our classes because we don't have the same segment of students that we normally do. So it's a great time for us to, work with other, departments and do some other.
Hey, RJ, thank you so much for doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you, RJ.
Yeah,
And,
thank you.
And thanks, Neha, and thanks, Tom. Now go home, relax, and go, oh, phew, and enjoy a maple cocktail.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Take care.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.